Hello, SCORR stakeholders. I have created this web map to support decision making within SCORR. Each of the data sets within this web map do have limitations. And if you have any concerns or questions about the data, feel free to contact me at any time. So when you open the web map, your initial view will be of the SCORR geography, which is San Juan and La Plata counties. And I've chosen some layers to automatically be turned on. And these may change depending on kind of the task at hand. So the left panel on the web map shows a legend of all of the layers that are turned on. The right panel has drop-down menus to turn on all of the available layers within the web map. So we can uncheck a box to turn it off and check it to turn it back on. You'll notice that when I do this, it disappears from the legend as well. So let's explore some of the different data sets within this web map. We'll look first at the recreation use data. When I turn it on, we see several different data sets from Strava, from San Juan Mountains Association, and other partners that appear on the map. Again, these are shown in the legend on the left. We also have data on infrastructure. The roads and trails layer is automatically turned on the web map. When we zoom out, those roads and trails will disappear, but once you zoom in, they reappear again. We also have campsites and facilities as layers on the web map. With any of the layers on this map, you can click on the point, line, or polygon, and you'll get a pop-up with some additional information. Most of these data sets include a data source field, which tells us where that data came from. So in this case, this facility point came from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I like to turn the layers off when I'm not using them. Otherwise, the map quickly becomes very overwhelming and hard to read. Our next group is wildlife, and this contains a lot of different data. So our first group is the Colorado Parks and Wildlife species data. This comes directly from CPW and is their species activity mapping data set. It has information about many different wildlife species and their wildlife habitat. Sometimes that's pretty basic, like Abert's squirrel overall range. And other times we have many different details about the wildlife habitat. So for elk, we have winter range, we have migration corridors, and other data sets as well. We have a similar data set for aquatic habitat, the CPW HPH aquatic data. And this just shows us wildlife habitat for aquatic species. We also have wild and scenic rivers and outstanding waters designations, which are protections for waterways. Finally, we have our wildlife sensitivity to impacts from recreation. This data set was derived by CPW using their species activity mapping layers, which are stored here. This tells us about impacts to wildlife from recreation. So this is the average impact to wildlife, and this is considering all species that exist in specific areas. It is shown in percent ranges of impact. We also have more specific information about impacts to wildlife from recreation in the winter and in production areas. So there's a lot to work with there in our wildlife group. And then finally, we have some layers that relate to land management. So the land management layer itself is automatically turned on. We can also look at restricted areas like wilderness and seasonal wildlife closures, in areas where over snow mechanized travel is permitted or not permitted. So the task that we are working on now is continuing to evaluate project proposals using the information on this map. So there's many things to consider. We might consider the land management in that area. Is it in wilderness? Is there a seasonal wildlife closure where this project is proposed? We might look at recreation use or existing infrastructure. Is this an infrastructure project that is going to be redundant? And also we can dig into the wildlife habitat in this area. So for example, let's look first at some of the Weminuche signage projects along the Continental Divide Trail. Our project locations data set compiles information from the project proposals themselves, as well as kind of summarizes some of the wildlife habitat data that is on this map. The project locations are sorted into project categories. So we have trail maintenance, infrastructure, wildlife habitat, signage, and educational projects that are each represented by different shapes. Some of the projects have many different locations. So for example, we'll see a lot of these purple circles, which represent E. coli monitoring sites across the landscape. We also have many purple diamonds, which are the Weminuche signage project. And let's look into this a little bit more. So I'm going to turn on the restricted areas layer. It looks like some of these points fall within a wilderness area, which is the green hatched lines. And if I click on one of the points, I'll get a pop-up with quite a bit of information. The first chunk of information talks about, is pulled directly from the proposal itself, and there's a link to the project proposal folder on Google Drive. We also have information about the wildlife sensitivity to impacts from recreation and the wildlife habitat layers that are intersected at this point. So at this location, the mean wildlife impact is 81 to 90, which is fairly high. And we can see that there are no other, the mean winter wildlife impact is blank and the production area wildlife impact is blank. That's just because this point doesn't overlap with those layers. We also have a long list of species that are intersected at this point. And we could explore more about the impacts from recreation on specific species that are in this list and bring those to our partners at CPW, or depending on the project, we may consider those in other ways. So for this project, we may look at the restricted areas and say, it's in wilderness. I wonder if the project proposal considered the wilderness area in how they will accomplish the project. These are questions that we can bring to the organizations that proposed the projects in our next stakeholder meeting. Let's look at another example. We'll look at one of the Care for Durango points at the Pine River Trailhead. And when we click on it, we see the mean wildlife impact is 91 to 100, and there's a winter wildlife impact there as well. Now, this is an educational project, so are we very worried about additional impacts to wildlife from recreation because of this project? Or will this project potentially help ease some of the burden on wildlife in this area? These are questions that we can kind of ask and use some of this spatial data to help us understand. So for an educational project, maybe we're wondering about how this project could educate trail users on black bear overall range, for example, and living with black bears since they do exist in this area. And finally, a made-up example, but another way that this map could be used to identify concerns about a project are, for example, maybe there's a project that's proposed within an area where there are peregrine falcon nests. So maybe there's a project that's proposed over here near Lake Nighthorse, where there are peregrine falcon nest sites. We may bring that to our partners at CPW at our next stakeholder meeting and ask for more information about how this project could potentially impact peregrine falcon nest sites, and what considerations we might want to have with that project. Depending on the nature of the project, it's possible that that doesn't have any real concerns for impacting the nest sites. But these are good things to kind of flag and bring up with the experts in the room. Okay, I think that is all I've got for this tutorial, but again, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions that you might have.